Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Saturdays Rewritten here on YouTube, or if you're listening on podcast, thanks for tuning in and lending me your ear. Today, we are jumping into the Big Ten, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. Who is going to shape up the Big Ten hierarchy? Who's going to come out on top? And before people get upset, I've already done an episode on Oregon. I fully expect Oregon to be in the conversation when it comes to the Big Ten hierarchy and the Big Ten championship, college football playoff, you name it. I expect Oregon to be there, but not in this episode. I'm just talking about these three schools, how last year shook up for them, what we expect of them this coming season. We're doing deep dives for these three. That's all. All right. So before we get into it, though, if you would do me the favor of liking this video and subscribing to my channel, that would help me with the algorithm and help my young channel get to growing. If you're listening on podcast, if you leave me a 5-star review on your favorite podcast listing platform, that would also be much appreciated. And either way, I thank you guys for giving me a shot and listening. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. All right, so we obviously have to take this to the top, right? We've got to start with the Ohio State Buckeyes, the national championship winning Ohio State Buckeyes, obviously in 2024. It was a fantastic finish. They lost by a couple of points in the end there. And then at home against Michigan, they lose to the Michigan Wolverines in what was easily just a heartbreaker. And I honestly didn't know if Ohio State was going to recover. It was bad in Columbus. I mean, we were talking about people wanting Coach Day's job gone. They wanted him out of Columbus. And if he didn't win in the first round of the college football playoff, I still think he probably would have been safe going into next year. But the seat would have been pretty warm as far as a program you want to be at when it comes to this new NIL era. Michigan's up there. Or excuse me, Ohio State's up there. Got Michigan on the brain because we're going to talk about them later this episode. In any case, that's what happened. Now, how did they do it? Well, they were number one in offensive FEI with Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator. FEI is the FRAMU efficiency indicator, or index. And what that basically means, this whole ranking is based on how well your offense did versus high quality competition. So Ohio State was number one in that category. Not a bad place to be. They also put up around 40 points a game, 490 yards of offense, 7.3 yards of play. They were fantastic at staying on schedule. Very balanced attack, run and pass, a lot of play action. Will Howard had a great year, 4,000 yards. Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson both put up over 1,000 yards. Some teams are lucky to have one running back put up 1,000 yards, let alone two. And Ohio State had two. Jeremiah Smith had over 1,000 yards receiving. Emeka Ibuka had over 1,000 yards receiving. Ohio State was great. Okay, they had a great attack. Defense was elite. Second in defensive FEI, around 16 points per game allowed, close to around 300 yards given up. Elite run defense. They only gave up about 73 yards per game. They had 40-plus sacks as a team with Tui Molo and Jack Sawyer leading the way on that. Top 5 in havoc rate and pass rush win rate. Best per play EPA margin in the nation. I mean, they had it all rolling. But all good things must come to an end, and here's what Ohio State's losing. They lost 14 NFL draft picks. 4 of them were in the first round. 14 NFL draft picks was the most of any other college football program this season. They lost their top running backs, defensive ends, offensive linemen. They lost 3 of their starters on offensive line. They lost their top defensive backs, other than Caleb Downs. He's still there. And they lost Jim Knowles, and they lost Chip Kelly. They lost pretty much everything across the board. So this is a massive drop-off in production here. And Jim Knowles' departure was surrounded by some drama. Basically, he wanted a contract extension before the college football playoff. That didn't happen, or the college football championship, rather. That didn't happen. And then he wasn't invited to the championship parade, which at that point, to me, it's kind of over at that point, which is why when Penn State came a calling after Tom Allen left, it was a match made in heaven, and Jim Knowles is off to Penn State. And then with Chip Kelly, he's off to the Las Vegas Raiders. Chip Kelly, to me, he always wanted to go back to the NFL after his first failed stint. He had some success with the Eagles, but then it all kind of fell off a cliff. This is his chance to kind of get back in the saddle in the NFL as an offensive coordinator, focus on the offensive side of things, and maybe build back towards an NFL career. I think that's kind of always been in the back of his mind. Where does that leave us when it comes to 2025? I mean, surely after losing all that talent, Ohio State is in for a downward year, kind of like Michigan was last year when they went 8-5. Surely that's where they're headed, right? Maybe if they were any other program, but this is Ohio State. Ohio State doesn't rebuild, they reload. And I think that's what we're looking at here with this Buckeye team. So first, we got to start out with the quarterback position. Right now, it's looking like Julian Sayin is the direction that the quarterback battle is going to go. It's not his job officially. I just think that's the direction it's headed. He's a former 5-star, ex-Alabama signee. He's the front runner right now. At running back, they got James Peoples and C.J. Donaldson Jr. C.J. is a transfer from West Virginia. He put up around 800 yards on the ground. He's a power running back, and he had 11 touchdowns on the ground, as well as 1 through the air. In the wide receiver room, they got Carnell Tate Jr., Brandon Inniss Jr. Of course, Jeremiah Smith is coming back to kind of headline the wide receiving room. And then they got Mylan Graham. He's going to add some depth. They also brought in some key transfers to kind of, once again, build the depth in some key positions. They brought in, like I mentioned, Donaldson. But then they also brought in Bo Atkinson on the defensive line to be one of the pass rushers. 35 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks last year at North Carolina. Ethan Onianwa started 9 games for Rice on the offensive line. He's an offensive tackle. He's likely going to slot in at one of the bookends there. And then they got a tight end in Max Clare, who had 51 receptions at Purdue. At the coaching positions, with the offensive coordinator, Brian Hartline is going from the wide receivers coach, moving on up to the offensive coordinator. And I think that's a great move. Brian Hartline, he's the whole reason Ohio State right these days is known as wide receiver U. It totally makes sense. He's got the recruiting acumen. He's got the coaching acumen. He's turned those wide receivers into just absolute studs. They were when they were coming in, but we see the product on the field. It speaks for itself. So to move him up to offensive coordinator duties, where he's going to oversee the entire offense, I think it was a great move, and he's certainly earned his keep with his performance over the years. Great hire, or promotion rather. I think he's going to help continue to grow things on the recruiting side of things. I don't think we're going to see a huge change offensively for Ohio State. I still think they're going to be very balanced. I think they're going to try to get the play action going, which will lead to those deep shots downfield to the likes of Jeremiah Smith. And I think Hartline's going to keep that ground and pound identity as well. They want to run the football at Ohio State too. But they also want to get the ball in the hands of their weapons on the outside. And Ohio State always has elite weapons there. And I think we're going to see more of that this year. Defensive side, they brought in Matt Patricia as the defensive coordinator. Good hire, in my opinion. We saw his success with the New England Patriots. 3 Super Bowl rings to his name under the likes of Bill Belichick, the greatest defensive mind in all of football, in my opinion, meaning he's not going to stay loyal to a particular formation. He's going to go with what's best for the team. And that's a 4-2-5, 3-4. It's going to be something like that. Yeah, I think that he's very focused on providing varying looks to confuse the offense and a variety of schemes. They've got a lot of good returning players on that side of the ball too. Caleb Downs at safety. He's elite safety. He's going to be more of a leader on this team this year. Wise beyond his years when it comes to football. Sonny Styles, an athletic and versatile player. He's going to take a larger leadership role as well. At cornerback, they've got a good one coming back in Davison Igbinosun. Despite some penalty issues, Igbinison, he's talented. He's a talented corner who can lock down receivers. Does have penalty issues, can get a little undisciplined there, but he's a baller at the end of the day. They've also got a defensive end in Caden Curry coming back. He's going to be a starter on the defensive line, contribute significantly. Caden McDonald, he's great when it comes to the goal line defense, and he's going to look to expand his role as a dominant interior defender. All that to say, Ohio State has some great players coming back, and Ohio State, they have guys who have kind of been waiting their turn to come back on the team and get more opportunities because Ohio State's so good and so deep when it comes to their roster. A lot of these guys who are now going to be promoted to starters on this team, they would likely be starting for 90% of other rosters across the landscape of college football, but because they play at Ohio State, they're on the bench. And now it's their turn. And that's what I think we're going to see with Ohio State. We're going to see a lot of new faces come to the forefront. And I think I fully expect Ohio State to be challenging for the Big Ten title. Let's take a look at their schedule and see how that's going to be shaping up. So August 30th, right out of the gate, they got to play Texas. Fortunately, it's at home. But still, a Texas Longhorn team that went to the college football playoff last year and has all the makings of doing it again this year. Texas obviously going to be led by Arch Manning, and Texas has the weapons on either side of the ball too. Defensively, I expect Texas to be good. Texas, over the last decade or so, was kind of known for being soft on that side of the ball. Not anymore. Texas has elite defense, and they're going to make it difficult on Julian Sayin or whoever's under center. Great pass rush last year. They recruit size at Texas. Offensively, they're going to have playmakers on either side of Arch Manning. He's going to have guys he can hand the ball off to. They're going to have a healthy running back coming back, and the likes of C.J. Baxter, who blew his knee out last year. He's back. The offensive line, they did lose some pieces on that offensive line for Texas, but I expect the offensive line to be solid. All that to say, talk about a rough matchup right out of the gate. And Ohio State wanted to move the game to a Sunday night, but Texas refused and said, we're going to keep it Saturday. Ohio State wanted to move it to a primetime matchup, but Texas, I don't blame them. They said no. The fan in me wants to see a night game between Texas and Ohio State, but because of big noon kickoff, which sucks in my opinion, we're going to see Texas and Ohio State play probably at noon. So get the big game right out of the way that day. Then they've got Grambling State in Ohio. Then they have a bye, so 3 straight weeks to maybe get some things tuned together, get some practice in, maybe settle things before they jump into Big Ten play at Washington, Minnesota, at Illinois, at Wisconsin. So that 4-week stretch right there is tough, and then they have a bye week before the Penn State game on November 1st. Washington could be tricky. I think the Huskies are going to be improved, and it's in Seattle. That'll be a tough game. Could be a night game. Then we got a bye week before the Penn State game, as I mentioned. James Franklin, talk about out of anybody who wants to beat Ohio State, James Franklin's got to be right up here at the top. He is so sick of hearing, oh, you're 1-9, you're 1 whatever versus Ohio State and Michigan. It's been forever since he's done anything against them. He really wants to lead his team to beat them. And you got the storyline of Jim Knowles coming back to Columbus. That's going to be an interesting game. Then you've got UCLA Rutgers at Michigan. You finish the season at Michigan, and, pound for pound, Ohio State might be more talented than Michigan, as was the case last year, and they still lost. And that was at home. So to go to the big house, and I think Michigan's going to be better this coming year, I don't know. That's a tough way to end the season. All that being said, I still fully expect Ohio State, based on their talent, based on this schedule, we should be looking at a 10-2, 11-1 Ohio State team probably heading towards the Big Ten championship, or at least being in the mix, and then talking college football playoff. That's what I think we're looking at with Ohio State. It may take a couple of weeks for them to get their feet under themselves, losing all that talent, and then new coaches. It may take some time to get the rhythm going, which is why I think Texas has a shot going into the horseshoe. I still think it's a toss-up, probably. Toss-up of a game. It's going to be a good one, but Texas will be tough, especially for a brand new quarterback and new coaches. Okay. Now we've got Penn State. Let's move on to the Nittany Lions. 2024 was a very successful year for Penn State. They go 13-3. Go to the college football playoff. They go to the Big Ten championship, first of all. Lose a close one to Oregon. Oregon was in control for a lot of that game, but Penn State, they did cut it to single possession on numerous occasions, but just could never get over the hump. And then they make it to the college football playoff. They beat Boise State. Frankly, that was, in my opinion, one of the better draws that they could have gotten. And then they go on to play Notre Dame in the semifinal game and lose a close one, a heartbreaker to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who would then go on to represent in the college football playoff championship game. So great year for Penn State, 13-3 overall. They did lose to Ohio State once again at home in a very grinded out, sloppy affair, and they just couldn't get it done at home. And people, of course, immediately jump out on James Franklin, say, oh, he can't win the big games. Maybe that's true, but he still wins about 80% of his games. I'm just saying. All in all, very successful year. Andy Kotelnicki at offensive coordinator led Penn State to number 4 offensively with as far as SP plus rating. Drew Aller, 3,500 pass yards, 5th in EPA and dropback. The running back duo of Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen, 2,400 plus combined yards. It's very successful on the ground. They were elite at staying on schedule. So the 3rd and 4th downs, they were 9th in the country, which basically means they were good at staying on schedule. So they would get a good gain on 1st down. And then 3rd and 4th down, they were converting quite a bit. Red zone efficiency. Red zone touchdown percentage, they were 17th, meaning they most of the time would punch it in the end zone, which is pretty key. The thing that Penn State lacked offensively, in my opinion, was the lack of explosive wide receivers. Tyler Warren at tight end, who was drafted in the 1st round, by the way, to the Indianapolis Colts, he put up over 1,000 yards, led the team in receptions, was kind of a do-it-all guy. He was a baller, but it seemed as though Penn State was lacking some of that punch on the edge at wide receiver. Defensively, they were great. What need I say? Tom Allen, he did a great job at defensive coordinator. He's off to Clemson, but before he left, they were 4th in defensive FEI rating, 5th in DF+. They gave up around 15 points a game, held defenses to under 300 yards a game, 44 sacks, more than Ohio State, 20% havoc rate, and then Abdul Carter. I mean, when you have a generational sack leader like Abdul Carter, 12 sacks last year. Penn State's good at bringing in pass rushers, aren't they? They had Micah Parsons, Abdul Carter, and then defensively, because they were getting such a good... Oh, they also had a guy by the name on the other side of Abdul Carter. They had the likes of... Why am I not finding his name? Bear with me here. Danny Dennis Sutton, DDS. Danny Dennis Sutton. There we go. 8.5 sacks, 15 havoc plays last year alone in 2024. He's back, and he's probably going to step into that Abdul Carter role. I don't know if he's going to be as successful or as prominent as Abdul Carter, but this is his time to shine. He's a good player. So Penn State is pass rush, maybe pass rush you at this point. So what is 2025 looking like for Penn State? Well, they are returning a good core of players. Drew Aller, he's staying. They brought in the 2 running backs, Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen. They're coming back. 4 offensive line starters returning. 67 starts between them all. And then 14 total returning starters, 9 on offense. So offensively, usually it takes a little bit more time for the offense to catch up. But maybe that's not as much the case coming out of the gate. Maybe Penn State's off to a hotter start because they've got so much continuity on offense and they got so many weapons. Wide receivers. I mentioned how they lacked explosiveness last year. It seems as though Penn State understood that and they went out and got some replacements. So they went out and got the likes of Trevor Pena from Syracuse, 5'10" wideout, led the ACC with 84 catches for 941 yards and 9 touchdowns in 2024. Not a bad stat line. He's a slot receiver who also doubles as an elite return specialist. Led the ACC last year in kick return average. So there's some speed and a weapon right there that can maybe open this Penn State offense up a little bit more. They've already got the ground game. Once you establish that ground game, that should open up the pass game a little bit more. Kyron Hudson from USC, he's making his way over to Penn State. He had some big plays for the Trojans. And then Devontae Ross of Troy, he's also coming over in the transfer portal. 3 wide receivers right there that are expected to make an instant impact for Penn State. They also bring in a defensive end addition in Daniel Jennings, 6'2", 250 pass rusher. He reclassified from 26 to 25 to join the team early. He was West Virginia's top prep player and adds depth to the edge rotation. And then, of course, I already mentioned Danny Dennis Sutton. It's his time, 8.5 sacks last year. And now that Abdul Carter is off to the NFL, 3rd overall pick in the NFL draft, it's DDS's time. Sutton's time to take his place as the leader of this front 7. And now you've got Jim Knowles coming over as defensive coordinator. Not a bad replacement for Tom Allen. So Jim Knowles leads arguably the best defense in the country last year. Statistically, it was. Yes, he had probably the most elite roster to work with, but he did it well. He put him in position to win. And his whole philosophy seems to be no explosive plays over the top. I'm going to have 2 safeties sitting back there. You are not going to beat us deep. That is his whole thing. And given that Penn State is a little bit lighter on the depth when it comes to linebacker this year, they did bring in a transfer from North Carolina in the linebacking side of things. Still, I fully expect him to keep the secondary as one of the prominent features. They do have a good experienced secondary this year. So I could see Jim Knowles running a 4-2-5, but he also likes to build towards the strengths of his players as opposed to focusing on a single formation. He's going to find what's best to fit the talent. But 4-2-5, based on the lack of extreme depth at linebacker and a good amount of safeties and corners that are going to have good talent, it makes sense that they go 4-2-5. So Penn State obviously has all the talent. How does their schedule set up? Well, here it is. To me, it sets up really well. You've got Nevada, FIU, Villanova, and a bye week to start off. 4 straight weeks of tune-up preparing for the Oregon game. Now, on the one hand, I could see the argument, well, it's good to get punched in the mouth early. But on the other, I feel like Penn State, they've already got such a good returning core that it's more about fine-tuning things, making sure these new pieces get acclimated nicely, getting prepped for the Oregon game. And then Oregon's has to come to Penn State. So really, the first 5 weeks are all at home in Happy Valley. And I think that Happy Valley is going to be pretty happy for the most part. I could see Penn State beating Oregon in that game. Well-rested, ready to go. It could be a whiteout game. I'm not sure based on big noon kickoff, which kind of likes to ruin things. But I think Penn State could be off to a heck of a start. Then let's look at the second half of the schedule. You got at UCLA, Northwestern, at Iowa. Iowa can be tricky. Kinnick Stadium is a tough one, and the Hawkeyes are always going to be a tough opponent on the road. So that could be a slip-up game. But then you got a bye week, and then it's at Ohio State. So this stretch right here, at Iowa, at Ohio State, Indiana even maybe. But this stretch is the tough one. Depending on how Penn State does here, to me, is really going to set up the rest of the season for them. James Franklin, I've already mentioned, he really wants to beat Ohio State. I'm sure he is sick of hearing wow, he can't coach in big games. I would again remind you that he has about an 80% win rate at Penn State, has won them numerous big-time bowls. So he's certainly a successful coach in his own right, one of the best recruiters out there. He just has to put it together against Ohio State. Not a lot of people have beaten Ohio State, but because Penn State is an elite team, everybody loves to put the microscope on that one. At the end of the day, you do have to end up winning some of those games. And who knows, maybe this is the year for Penn State. But being at Ohio State, that's tough. That is not an easy task going to the shoe. Good thing they have Drew Aller and a veteran quarterback and veteran running backs. I don't know, Penn State, maybe this is the time. Ohio State lost a lot of talent from last year. Then Indiana at home. this is not grandma's Indiana. Coach Cignetti has arrived, and I fully expect him to continue to build Indiana to a team that nobody wants to play against. They're sneaky good, I think. At Michigan State, Nebraska, I think Nebraska's getting better too, but I don't think they're ready to beat Penn State on the road yet. At Rutgers to finish the season. I look at this schedule, I could very well see Penn State, they're either going to be 10-2 or 11-1 heading towards the Big Ten championship game. They have a very favorable schedule. They could run the table. I don't think that's impossible. I probably would say it's more likely they're on the between 10-2 and 11-1. That's just my gut feeling looking at this. Obviously, college football, it's crazy. It can make the best looking predictions look stupid by the end of the season. But that's what I think Penn State's probably going to fall into as we head towards the 12-team playoff once again. And at the end of the day, Penn State, that's probably the first team I would think of who benefits the most out of this 12-team format. Penn State. They can lose a couple of games and they still get to go to the playoff. James Franklin is in a good setup there. That's Penn State in my book. Look out for the Nittany Lions. And that brings us to the Michigan Wolverines. So we know how Michigan did last year. They kind of had a rough go of it, 8-5, the post-Jim Harbaugh era. It was rough, and their offense didn't look good. They were 6-5 heading into the Ohio State game. Everybody expected Ohio State to roll over Michigan like it was nothing. Michigan didn't have a quarterback. Their running attack was 73rd in the country because the defenses would just pack the boxes knowing that Michigan can't throw the ball. Not a good year until Michigan upsets Ohio State out of the blue 13-10 in a really ugly game. Who cares, though? They beat the Buckeyes. They spoiled the season, in their mind at least. They're gonna hang that on their hat. Who cares? We beat Ohio State. We planted the flag on that block O at midfield in the heart of the Buckeyes. We planted that flag, and then there was a brawl afterwards. Frankly, the brawls don't bother me at all. Anyways, then Michigan goes on and beats Alabama. Talk about a difference a couple of weeks can make in college football. Same thing for Ryan Day. Ryan Day goes on and wins a national championship. The story is totally rewritten. For Michigan, they go from 6-5, likely going to be 6-6 when they lose to Ohio State, go to some crummy bowl that nobody cares about. And then who knows for next year. But they win these two games against Ohio State and Alabama, two of the Blue Bloods. And that was an Alabama team that had a lot of their starters playing, by the way. And they beat them. Talk about a change in trajectory. Then in the offseason, they go out and sign the likes of Bryce Underwood, the number one quarterback in the class. Yes, they paid $10 million to get him, but they did it. They made it clear that we know we need to improve right here. Here's where we're at. Here's what we're willing to do to make that happen. They did it. Suddenly, looking at next year, on top of that, they brought in a good recruiting class and they brought in a good transfer class. And they have some good returning talent for next year. I'm not saying that Michigan is automatically in the conversation for winning the Big Ten championship. I still think, in my gut, they're probably a year away from that. But I think this could be a 10-win Michigan team potentially. I think they could be in that conversation. And they have Ohio State at home to end the year. Before we get to that, though, let's talk about this year's team. Obviously, they lose the likes of the great defensive lineman duo of Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Those guys are both gone. Two of the best defensive tackles in the game, they both go in the first round. I mean, that's tough to replace. But they bring in some dang good talent. I already mentioned the quarterback situation. They bring in Bryce Underwood. He is a little bit raw, but his arm talent is obviously there. His agility is there. He's a big athletic guy. He's 6'5", and he can move. He's strong. The offensive line's probably going to be better in my book. It's not, by the way, it's not totally Bryce Young's job yet. I just think he's the front runner, and to me, it makes sense to just start him and get experience for him now and have him go into these tough games now, so that as Michigan continues to build on these recruiting classes and continue to build toward them for maybe a year or so, and suddenly by the time Underwood is upperclassman, Michigan's talking about title run. That's what I think they're at. Maybe they'll come out and surprise me. In any case, they bring in Justice Haynes from Alabama, an elite running back who's got some good receiving skills as well. He's going to help out of the backfield. I think if teams are fearing Michigan's pass game again to where they at least have to respect it, we see Michigan return to certainly they can do a lot better than 73rd on the ground. That's the thing with Michigan. They go 8-5 last year without a quarterback, basically. They had Jack Tuttle and Alex Orji. They both saw time, but they put up mediocre numbers. I'm just saying, if Bryce Underwood could come in and do half as good as McCarthy did in his senior season, why is it so impossible to believe that Michigan could put up 9 or 10 wins? 11, probably a little much, in my opinion. Let's look at their schedule. I think ultimately they've got at Oklahoma. Their schedule's pretty tough. They got New Mexico and Central Michigan in the first 3 weeks. They've got at Oklahoma on September 6th. I think that's going to be tough. You got a guy by the name of John Mateer at Oklahoma, who I think is going to take their offense to a whole new level. I think their defense is going to be solid at Oklahoma. You got Brett Venables as the coach there. That's probably a tough one for Michigan to go on the road and win, especially with a young quarterback under center, and Bryce Underwood. Assuming they start him. Maybe they don't start him, but in my opinion, they will. You got at Nebraska on the September 20th. You got Wisconsin at home. At USC could be tricky. Washington could be tricky. And then the last stretch at Michigan State, Purdue, a bye, at Northwestern, at Maryland, and then Ohio State at home, which they've proven, even as an underdog, they can go on the road and beat the Buckeyes. Who's to say they couldn't do that at home? I think it's possible. But the stretch that I'm going to eye is Nebraska through Washington, September 20th through October 18th. That middle of the season is what's going to decide what type of Michigan team we're looking at. Are we looking at a team that's maybe heading towards another 8-5 season and still has a lot of work to do and is going to be looking more to the future? Or are we looking at a Michigan team that is going to push for 10, maybe 10 wins and push for a Big Ten championship maybe? Maybe they take down Ohio State again, make it 6 straight? Is that the kind of Wolverine team we're looking at here? Who's to say? We have to see what they start shaping up as, but I'm just saying, if Bryce Underwood can elevate the passing attack even half as good as to what it was with McCarthy, and receiving, it's a little unproven at Michigan. Not really sure what we're looking at when it comes to wide receiver. The running backs are good. I expect the offensive line to rebound a little bit, but we got to see what the receivers can come up with. That could be another key that maybe holds this Michigan team back from where they need to be. Maybe they need to go out and get a couple pieces there. Michigan's kind of a question mark for me, all that to say. But I do think they're going to be better, and I do think they're going to make some noise and be in the mix. So, keep an eye out for the Wolverines. I think Ohio, currently in my mind, Ohio State and Penn State are kind of up here with Oregon, and then Michigan would maybe be on tier 2, right underneath that, and trying to challenge for that tier 1. That's how I look at it currently, but things can obviously change in the land of college football. It is as crazy as it gets. It's very unpredictable. Didn't expect Michigan to beat Ohio State last year in the shoe. Look what happened. With all that being said, I'm Garrison Hardy. Thanks for tuning in once again. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a lot of fun content coming ahead. SEC preview coming up. We got a look at the state of Florida. That'll be a fun one. And got a couple of special documentary style projects coming out as well. So subscribe if you want to catch more of that, and you can find me on podcasts as well. Well, nevertheless, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.